So hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of The Positive Change, and we're now going to start a new series. It's going to be the Heart Interviews, and today I have my first guest who's also been here before on the podcast, Sophie Gregoire. And for those of you who don't know her yet, she's a writer, author, channel reader, transformational coach, and a sensuality guide. And not that long ago, she just published her book called She's the Moon, which is very exciting. And I'm really happy, Sophie, that you are here again.
Yes, thank you. I'm very excited to co-create with you again and share about new topics and everything. Thank you.
Yeah. So before we so now we're also going to get started with some fun questions for Sophie. And for everyone who's listening, it might also be fun for you to ask these questions yourself. So the first one is, what is your favorite animal and 3 deep reasons why?
So my favorite animal and you said?
And so just your favorite animal. What's your
Okay.
favorite animal?
So I feel very feline. So I'm hesitating between the cat and the tiger. So I'm gonna say the cat because it's more common. Because tigers is certainly hard to see them. So the cat.
Yeah, and then can you also give 3 more deeper reasons why? So not just like I like cats, but
Okay.
yeah.
So they are very independent. They do whatever they want. They go wherever they want. They don't really need attention all the time. And I find this very inspiring in some way, and it resonates a lot with me. Then I found they can have a mystical aspect to them. Very often on my journey, cats show up at a very divine time. So I tend to see them as a guide or as a, I don't know, mystical presence or something. And what else? I think they are very beautiful. Like, it's pretty, it's elegant. The feeling way is very elegant, the way they move. I don't know. Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
don't
good.
know if that's deep enough.
No, it's really good. Yeah, because it's actually more a psychological question, so it's also fun to know, and it's kind of your favorite animal in a way also represent your perfect mate. So it either be a partner or a best friend, someone you're really close to. So
Yeah,
maybe it's fun
I
to
think
see
that's
those
true.
characteristics back. Yeah, it's cool. And also, if you could decide to meet, have like a cup of coffee or have breakfast with any historical figure, so any well-known figure for you in history, so you can just have an in-depth conversation with that person, who would it be?
So something came to me very, very fast. It's Francis Scott Fitzgerald, the writer. So I don't know if I say it well with my French
Yeah,
accent, but
yeah. No, I think, yeah, now it's going to start ringing some bells. Yes, but maybe for
yeah.
those who are listening, to explain a little bit more about who he is.
Yeah, he wrote things like Gatsby and or Tender as a Night, or I don't remember more. So it came to me very fast because he has a very deep type of writing, very emotional, very profound. It makes me think of the Scorpio energies that I have to. So I resonate a lot with the depth and even sometimes the drama of his writings. It's never very light. I don't know. So I kind of like it. And yeah, with Zelda, they were a very emblematic couple. And I think she was sick, she had mental illness, but she wrote very beautiful pieces. She wrote some quotations that are very inspiring for following your star, following your sun, following what is sparkling for you. So she was always drawn to something else, and maybe something more beautiful or more, I don't know, lighter, more sparkling. But at least she did something from there. So I remember it inspired me a few years ago to read that.
Okay. And if you could ask them a question, or what would you ask them about if you would have a conversation?
Um, maybe how the inspiration of their books was coming so big. How did that happen, to have such a flow? I don't know. I think that's
So mainly
don't
about your
exactly know.
writing, you would ask.
Yeah. The writing is very rich, intense, profound. Like it has a lot of things, and I never really know how to write that much.
Yeah. And how was you, because you just published your book, She's the Moon, and how was that writing process for you?
So the writing process happened through several years. So it was very scattered in time. And I didn't like sit somewhere and decided, okay, let's write it. Maybe I should have, but I didn't did it that way. I was traveling, I was experiencing like the journey, some breaking free moments, some relationship things. And from time to time, I had very powerful sort of quotes or words coming to me or poetry. And I just thought, okay, let's keep track of all of this and see if we can make something from it. So I remember writing when I was moving. So in airports, in trains, in buses, all those moments when you leave somewhere or you leave something and you sort of feel carried or guided by the unknown or calling. So it's hard and it's very freeing. And I think those moments were the most rich in the inspiration.
Yeah, I think it's really cool actually. To write at all these different places, and because also the setting also can really influence your writing, of course.
Yeah, that's true.
And what was your favorite conversation this year you had with
That's
someone?
interesting. With anyone?
Anyone.
Like,
It can also be like a normal day-to-day conversation with a friend or whoever. Stranger, doesn't matter.
okay, I have an idea. So it's kind of recent. Maybe this is why it's coming to me. But so when I left Paris a few years ago to travel and to start, I don't know, doing healing things and writing things. So I went to Southeast Asia, but before I was living in Paris and I had a large group of friends. And when I left and I left my partner as well, I felt called to go elsewhere for a while. I don't really have contacts with them because I felt I had to do a lot on my own and it wasn't really resonating. But I met some of them again recently. And there is one of the women, we had nothing was really special in the conversation, but it felt like I saw her before, like just the day before, not like 3 years ago. And it was very fun and light and happy, as if nothing has happened. And I just understood when someone is meant to be on your path, even if you have to take a break, you don't really lose them, right? It's not that black and white. So it was very loving and very like full of hope for me to see that you don't have like the spiritual word and sort of people doing that, and then the 3D word, and then people cannot really be together. It's more we all have our own different aspects, but we can have one foot there, and be embodying who we are. And so it was really like a coming back home for me as well, like a loop of the journey.
So kind of like a full circle.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's cool. And how has kind of this year your perspective on relationships, like how has it changed for you?
That's an interesting question. I discovered, I would say, a kind of love I've never had before, way more grounded and mature, and I think less reactive. And so for people, and it's interesting because we want to talk maybe about trauma after, but for people like myself, and I think many of us that have trauma, we tend, when we find love, to have traumatic reactions coming through, like in the container of relationships, because we are really intimate and there are a lot of trust issues coming back and all that. So I used to be either in relationships that felt very safe to me, but I wasn't that deeply in love or something, or with people that I really appreciated and really felt for very strongly, but we had a lot of trauma on both sides. So it was very intense and fiery. And recently I discovered that you can have a blend of both. You can both feel safe and healthy with someone, and also feel very strongly for them. And as you go, you keep healing your what comes and your trauma and your wounds, but the relationship is not designed by it, or it doesn't have only this energy. Like the energy goes like lessons and lessons in time for me. So the people that I attract also are less in this energy as well. So all this to say that I think I just discovered a new type of relationship that is a blend of many things I was looking for in the past.
Okay, so it is in a way for you also less, we could say, like traumatic, and then more traumatic in the sense, like, how do you say it? Like a lot of overreaction, right? And a lot of, I feel like what for me has also changed a lot this year is projection, that we can also project a lot onto another person, and we can do it is in a sort of positive and in a negative way. So we can also project maybe our fantasies onto someone, right? And then you think like, okay, this is how that person is, and then you can sometimes people can forget, even in long relationships, we can forget to actually get to know the person, or actually understand the person, and to really let go of what you think someone is like, or what role do you want them to play, but to really see someone for who they is. And I feel like trauma can sometimes block us from doing that.
Because when we have this type of history, namely coming from childhood, I feel that we may seek love so much that whenever we sort of try and start to find someone, he must be the one, or there is a real desire to merge or to find the one or the bond that's going to be the revolutionary bond or whatever. So that's one piece of projection. And as you said, there is also the negative one, meaning I'm in fear. So as I'm in fear because I'm diving into intimacy, I'm going to say that my partner is doing something wrong, or is not loving me in the right way, or whatever. So as you said, it can exactly go in both directions. And the trauma piece is interesting too, as a process of releasing. And I feel relationships, as many other things, help us a lot, and makes me think of all the work of Peter Levine and Bessel van der Kolk around how you release the energy of trauma, because it really explains that trauma is an energy, and it's like something that's stuck within you. And so you have different schools around that. How do we move energy and how do we release it? But the more we pretend it's not there, or we try and avoid some of our felt sense, there is all this how to put it, this explanation around the felt sense, meaning you have to have a release, you have to have an explanation, you have to feel some energy in you and release it. You must do so. And it's all this understanding around the instinctual self, meaning following your instinct and doing what has to be done. So some people do it like in life experiences, some others are going to use more, I don't know, tools like yoga or trauma releases tools. But in all ways, it must go out. And so if we pretend it's going out only, for example, through language therapy, or through I don't know, remembering, all those things that are only mental, it's actually not really out. Because as I explained, I really felt this in my own experience and with clients and whatever, it's always like a body, like a mind body, like the body is so intertwined with the process. So we must include it in the release. So as long as something is not really felt and released, if it's just like thought about, or even understood or remembered or written about or whatever, if there is not the bridge between body and mind, it's not really out. So all this to say that relationships, for instance, do create this container where more of the past can be received and healed happily in a healthy way. But when it can be released and unstuck, if I can say this.
Yeah, it's very good that you mention it, because a lot of times that's kind of more the old paradigm, and also of psychology and other things, is that kind of our memory is kind of stored in our brain. And of course there is truth in this, but then we forget a very important aspect, and that is also that our memories are also stored in our bodies, so energetically, but it can even turn physically. And what is very important, that it is released to some type of process. And the problem with just talkative therapies is, like you said, not connecting it to the actual body, is that on the moments when we experience trauma, actually our frontal cortex and our speaking center of our brain is kind of shut down. This is also what the work of Bessel and Peter Levine really explains, so that the old ways we have aren't really actually set for actually releasing the trauma. It can, of course, talkative therapy can help people a lot, and especially when they found the right therapist for them. But it's very crucial when something really, we really want to release something or to complete this cycle, because sometimes with trauma we can experience the same type of experience over and again. And it's so important that we see on all levels how it affected us. So on a mental level, on an emotional level, and on a physical level. So to really connect these aspects, because otherwise we can maybe talk about it with a therapist or talk about it with a friend, and then we can continue to run into the same things, not knowing why, because we've just only worked with our conscious memory. So what we consciously know and what are we consciously aware of. But actually most of our trauma and actually the experience that we don't want to see and acknowledge are actually stored in our subconscious. And that's what the body is as well.
Yeah, exactly. And also it is remembered not always knowingly or because we ask for it. Sometimes we are going to see that we may have some wounds or unhealthy reactions, for example, or trauma being relieved, but it wasn't expected. It just happening within, one day, just coming to us. While if we stay on the talkative therapy, we may not even be aware of it. And this is also why I found it's slightly different, but for all this spiritual journey, many people speak a lot about like trainings and even books and all that, which of course I love as well. But I've seen, at least for myself and for the people like close friends or sisters or clients, that life teaches us a lot. So it's good to have a grounding and some knowledge, because of course what someone else has discovered, it's nice to have it in mind because it can help. But I've never really felt that it was a core of the evolution, meaning as long as we don't move through something and really have the emotional adventure or the inner journey linked to it, it's very difficult to have a solid knowledge or a solid ground within ourselves about it. And I feel trauma is an example of that. If I say, oh, this happened to me, but I've healed it and it's fine. And for example, this makes me think also of the trauma bonding I wanted to tell you about.
Yeah.
So for example, if we have a traumatic relationship when we are a child, and then we said, oh, I worked on it, so it's healed, but we are actually too scared or avoidant to go into a new kind of relationship. So we think it's healed, but we actually don't allow a new container to make us see if it's true or not. Then the progress is a little stalled because there is no new room of experiences to actually find out. So I found that a lot, like for me, a lot is happening more in real life. And then I tend to use other like knowledge and books and trainings when needed, but I feel that the path is more directed by you know what's actually happening and what we're called to do, and all this felt sense that they talk about, like Peter Levine talks about, which is I feel called to that and I don't exactly know why, but so we follow the intuition and the instincts and the gut, and then we are somewhere with someone and something happens and it actually happened that it's healing, but we couldn't know before, you know, all this process of moving through life and allowing what has to be done and unravel to actually happen, which is a little scary also because we tend to feel that we don't have a lot of control over it, but yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of it, like what I find sometimes can be kind of the difficult thing is that, and I've seen this a lot with people who've experienced a lot of trauma in relationships, especially in earlier relationships, also with parents, and especially childhood trauma. If we've already experienced it from such a young age and then throughout the rest of our life, sometimes what can also happen is even when we're in a very safe environment and even in a very safe relationship, that actually then we can have the feeling like, oh, there's something wrong, this is not right. So we can even get physical reactions or physical responses that can be very strong, even. And then it's also really important to become aware of what is it that you're actually feeling. Because sometimes we can get addicted to stress in some type of situations, or in some relationship can also be the addiction kind of to drama, right? To that explosive and then like the rush kind of, also physically, and that's what we would call falling in love.
Yeah.
But actually, also more the Buddhist saying is when the right person for you is actually the person where you feel really calm with.
Yeah, that's such a learning curve for me. I think it took me maybe all the years until now to understand it. Like, you know, I knew it, but I wouldn't really understand it. Like for me, love would feel like, you know, all this excitement and this fire and this passion. And I think we can have this and this intensity, but it's not the core. It's not what allows to move through time and remain and grow and evolve and have conflict and all those things. So yeah, and so the trauma bonding I wanted to mention to you is, you know, this addiction to that's unconscious to relationships that help us actually, like we think we can fix what happened before unconsciously through a bond in our adult life. So for example, that would be being with someone as an adult, as a partner that really mirrors what happened with the caretaker when we were a child. And I've seen that what's the most common is when we had in childhood cycles of soothing and wounding. You know, someone is really kind to you or even apologizes or says I love you and etc., but then someone is trying to, not maybe trying, but someone is hurting you or not respecting you or neglecting you. So you go into this loop of, oh, I'm feeling safe, I'm not feeling safe, I'm feeling well cared for, I'm not there. And so it all goes that way. And so there is all these theories that I found super interesting around in adult life attracting like energetically the same kind of partner for a big lesson that is you don't have to please your caretaker and you don't have to stay there, because when the child learned this, they also learn that maybe it's their fault, or maybe the ups and downs of the parent is their fault, their responsibility, maybe they will need to fix it, or maybe if they're kind and they don't, like they pretend they're not sad when something happens, maybe they can keep the peace. So this happened to me, for example, like, oh, this is weird, but if I don't say anything and if I pretend I'm good, I'm going to keep the peace. So in this way, I make sure that there is no noise or drama today, you know. So you pretend everything is all right and the climate is fine, so you don't generate like another thing. So you think you're responsible and you think you're the fixer and so on. So what happens like in adult life for those children is that we tend to also think we can fix the situation, and we tend to get super attached to the happy moments and so disregard the others. It's like a shoot off, you know, woo, woo. And we tend to think, okay, so if I improve myself and if I become super like healed, like I'm perfect, and the connection is going to be perfect too, because I'm responsible for its energy and how it's playing out and all that. So it's very interesting, because then we can learn that we don't have to do that, and there is me and there is them, and there is what I do right, do wrong, etc., and there is also the responsibility of another, and it's not codependent, it's not always intertwined. There are two different people. And so the big lesson for the adult is to decide to how to put it, to leave it, and also in order to show to the inner child that it was safe to leave and to exit this type of container, instead of always trying to fix it until you're exhausted and you're depleted, because all your energy is going to trying to fix it. Yeah,
and in a way it also turns in trying to fix yourself in a way, because you're blaming yourself. And I think it's so common in childhood, because we have this, in a way, egocentrical perspective, because we take everything personally, right? So when someone outside of us does something wrong, we blame ourselves or make it mean that there's something wrong with us, or something that we have done something wrong, right? And usually these are what we call coping mechanisms, because if we're the person that is wrong, or if we can do something about it, then we're still somehow in control, and we still somehow have some power. And that is actually the way a child copes with pain, because it's actually more empowering to do that than to what actually is the reality of a child, that you're basically at the mercy of your parents in a lot of ways. And I think it's very good the way you say how it can influences our later relationships. And we hear, especially within spirituality, the concept of mirroring a lot, right? So that people outside of selves, people in our lives, especially our core relationships, they mirror back our own problems or our own resolved issues or our own wounding. And
exactly.
We can again use it in a self-abusive way. So that can even mean that if something does something wrong, and you say like, oh yeah, but what does it say about me? And then we're again in the perspective of then we're no longer in a conscious, aware perspective, which is what the concept of mirroring is about. We're actually again in the perspective of a little girl or a little boy, thinking that everything is their fault.
Yeah, and everything is about them, and they can change things, and maybe if they were acting different or, you know, speaking different, maybe the day would be different. Yeah, that's very interesting how you're sharing about the egoistical perspective that we have when we're young, because yes, we sort of see everything as revolving around ourselves, and it's very hard for a very long time to see the parents as like normal people, I think. Okay, so this person is my father, my mother, and maybe they're wounded, and maybe it had nothing to do strictly with me. And for a very long time, we identify with the way we were treated, and because it's so ingrained and it gets so deep in ourselves and in the psyche and in the body and everything, that we tend to identify with the dynamics, like the relationship dynamics of it. And so I work primarily with women. We speak a lot about the father's issues, but I know a lot about the mother's issues, and the way we can start to bond with the feminine can be very wounded or very competitive or distorted, or, you know, all those things. And then it stays within, And it's very like not hard, but it takes time and acknowledgement to sort of be like, okay, so this behavior had nothing to do with me. And then I found when we can do that, it's like we change glasses of the word, and all of a sudden we see everything differently. So this is an independent person, right? Because what also characterizes the trauma bonding is that it's highly codependent, meaning it coexists based on the, you know, the way people get sort of merging or mixed. So if two individuals are independent and sovereign emotionally, then it cannot go that way. But the trauma bond also relies on one of them or both really needing outside love and outside presence to feel good. This is what like generates and allow the fact that we allow anything, because we need love so much, right? And so this is this dependency that allows the like the bond in itself, and the time it can last and how deep it can go and so on.
Yeah, because when what kind of then happens is that you have two people that are still in pain, and they're kind of also in a way bonding through their pain.
Yeah.
Right. And you see this is very common in the typical narcissistic and codependent relationship. And what we see happening quite a lot and quite often is that a lot of times the narcissist is always labeled as the bad guy, right? In a lot of ways, and that it's a bad person that you should run away and get away from. But what the reality is someone is really in that codependent pattern, they will attract someone new again. So it's not actually about just getting out of the relationship with someone who treats you badly, but it's also really seeing on why have you attracted that relationship in the first place. And with codependency, it can a lot of times, what I've realized as well is about being needed. That if you're needed by someone else outside of yourself, it can feel like, again, a false safe connection. So it can feel false safe because you don't fear someone abandoning you as much, because they need you, but actually that's not a healthy connection.
Exactly.
At all.
It can be to feel needed, or it can be feel cared for, protected, can be many different things. I feel what we really lacked maybe initially is what we maybe keep seeking, as if something new could fix the past. And so the more we seek that, the more I don't know, I've seen it doesn't work that way.
Because it can also be like a feeling of not being loved for who you are as a child, and then you're constantly seeking that or trying to fill that void of love that you didn't have as a child and get that from someone else. And that's kind of also the romantic ideas we've been fed, is we all project it onto one person. They have to provide it all to us. And I think when we start to get more into healthier relationship, it's about becoming aware of like, okay, maybe it's not that healthy to try to expect it all from one person.
Exactly.
Yeah. And not just because that person can leave one day or avoid, even if you would stay with that person, it wouldn't be healthy, because you would really pressure each other and burden each other and actually prevent yourself from having also more meaningful, deep connection outside of that relationship as well.
Exactly. And it's when we identify the nature, like if there is a trauma piece within a relationship, I've seen it can be like small and then it can have a healthy base, or it can be mostly only that, right? Like I mean, we can be with someone that has a little of that, or we can have a little of that, and then people are willing to grow and to see it. If they're willing to have awareness about it, it's something like very beautiful. But sometimes like the worst examples I know, I really don't want to see think, and that's maybe the most, how to explain, the most trauma bond for the other, because the less someone wants to see, the more the other wants to fix. And then thinks it's me, right? It's not like a common dance. It's more, okay, so I'm sorry, blah, blah. And so we can have many, many different examples, but it's interesting to see the different, I would say, categories that can exist, and the way people can see it, and allow change, and actually how powerful that is to reclaim our power and a sovereignty also after something like that happens, to be like, okay, this happened because of this and that reasons. I can see it, and I can also move forward, and I can also acknowledge part of me, call that in to learn something and to grow, and then the growth is done, and so we can move forward. So it's very, I've seen it can be hard, but also it can be very freeing and very enlightening to move through this type of experiences, if we can see the lesson of it.
Yeah, definitely. Because I also feel like if you, for example, have an extremely strong connection to someone, like I said before, like not that you feel calm and feel safe, but really these more physical, emotional reactions and overthinking all the time. But a lot of times it means is that that person brings up a lot of things that are suppressed within you. And that's one of the reasons why that attraction can be so strong.
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't mean if you would have resolved that you wouldn't have any attraction to that person anymore. Because sometimes it is, right? It doesn't always mean that when you have all these things that it means you're with the wrong person. But it's only through doing that integration work and working on these traumas and doing these processes, you can actually find that out. Because what will start to happen is that you also have, like, first you kind of have a desire to be with someone, and when that desire is not being met, it can turn into more neediness, and then we have the extreme, which is like craving, right? The craving of someone, and that's kind of the unhealthy pattern that I mean, is that the extreme craving. So that is always a good sign for you to see, like, oh, what am I not seeing here that is missing in my life? Because when we have such a strong desire to be with someone, there's always something that is missing.
It's always, that's why it's always interesting and enlightening in some way, if we can see what's on the other side of the pain. Like there is pain, there is tension. Instead of projecting only, I'm going to try and see what's the tension, what's the pain. So I'm gaining awareness about myself, right? It happened to me in the book, there are a lot of love things in it. And so what happened in this relationship that like generated those ratings, so there was a lot of love, I believe, and especially on my end, and it was beautiful, but I needed this type of masculine figure to like step into more of my own power. So there was a lot of love, right? But it was intertwined with things that I felt I couldn't do on my own. And it's like you see someone and you think, okay, so in some way, this type of energy, like that felt very solar, is something that inspires me. So there is love, and there is also a sort of unconscious draw, sometimes also to have the qualities of someone else. I've seen that a lot in relationships, healthy, unhealthy. I think it's very common to be drawn to people that the energy we feel is familiar or is attractive. But sometimes it's attractive because, at least for a while, we feel that we lack some of their traits, right? And so this didn't last, this piece of, oh, this is solar, I would like that too. But I remember it sort of called me, right? So very often that's also a part of why we stay in something. It's like we're drawn to gaining or being inspired by some traits of someone and to gain what they have. Like someone has, I don't know, financial stability,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we don't want to that they provide for ourselves, but we like the energy of it and we like to be in the energy of it. So we tend to stay with them to be on that level. Or someone is very charismatic and we tend to want to have that too. So we stay with them to receive the same type of energy from the outside, right? So very often that's very common to stay in, even in groups of people, to receive the energy we think we cannot receive on our own, while it's never actually really true, right? Everything can come from I would say the growth of the self and self-empowerment and yeah, and responsibility as well.
Yeah. And this was also exactly what I meant with the attraction. So when we feel a really strong pull, it's like,
Yeah,
and you mentioned it really well, it's like that need, it can be a need for financial stability, but it's for other people can need a freedom or whatever that person makes you feel. So that's also a really good way to actually reflect back on a connection or on something like that, to really see like what need is it actually revealing of mine. And maybe it is a healthy way to actually meet that need within a relationship, right? Like in a way. And this
yeah,
is also where this spiritual and the human things can conflict sometimes a little bit. In a way, yes, things come from within and from yourself, but sometimes we're also interdependent, right? So
I was
sometimes
about to
we
say
do
this
need
word
other
exactly.
people at the same time, but it's really about becoming aware of what we need and why we need it. And when we're aware of it, it will no longer be as destructive. Because
Yeah,
otherwise we're
exactly.
just boom, kind of like unconsciously jumping into a relationship instead of really becoming aware of why am I attracted to the person in the first place.
Yeah. And you make me think of, like, if we try to differentiate maybe like healthy attachment and unhealthy, like there are many, many ways to do that. But I just thought when you were sharing that if it's healthy, like mostly it's not really about feeding our own needs or fulfilling them, but it's more about sharing love and enjoying someone else's presence in a sort of pure manner. Like, I enjoy his presence, I like to be around his energy, not that much to take from it, more just because I like to care, and I do care, you know. It's very loving, but it's not much else. But when it starts to be unhealthy, it's when we, like, I want to stay around because I may gain, like, even consciously I'm sort of gaining something. And that is when the codependent patterns start to play out, when, like, the purity starts to lessen, you know, and the like the draw to having our needs met through another tends to grow. That's when it gets like more unhealthy, of course.
Yeah. And especially what's always really important when, like I said, we can meet our needs for other people, but what's then really important to know is that you have to be compatible.
Yeah.
Right? Because what we see a lot in relationships is that sometimes we feel like we feel like we have to sacrifice our own personal needs for someone else.
Yeah.
And this is also really within like the more unhealthy relationship. And what then actually is happening, and this isn't like the fault of one or the other that is doing something bad, but it's actually that you're not that compatible with someone. And we can even be really attracted to people but have completely different desires, and a very typical one, for example, one wants children and the other one doesn't. One or the other has to sacrifice their own personal desires, and
Yeah.
in the long run that will lead to resentment or whatever else.
Sure.
And that's also really important to know when it comes to a healthy relationship. It's also about, because when you're really compatible, you naturally start to fulfill each other's needs without feeling you have to give something up, or
Yeah, it
um,
flows.
yeah.
I've seen some things that's healthy. It feels natural. Nobody, of course, there are compromises or, you know, efforts. I mean, you know, life is not just, but it's not forced, or it doesn't feel like a natural, or like, oh, I have to do that because otherwise that's gonna work. This type of like, sometimes we feel like a dramatic calling to do something, and it creates tension because it doesn't respect our truth. But it has to be done to maintain the peace. It's the same thing as in childhood. Maintain the peace. I'm going to do this and that to maintain the peace. And so the self tends to lessen its power and its natural energy for the unit of the relationship.
Yeah, so then we kind of have to move away from ourselves in order to stay, and that is very unhealthy.
Exactly.
And I also want to because I also read your book already, and I also just went through it real quickly just an hour ago, and just want to, I think it will fit our conversation quite well to read a small piece of it, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's really also about basically what we've talked about. So if you can, if you're able to, don't fall in love with a person's potential. They could be, who they could have been, who they could have risen or soared into. If you can, and even if you see the purity of a soul, fall in love with the person. Fall in love with a man or a woman. Words, flesh, action, actual beingness, actual behavior. I thought it would also fit well.
It's all the fantasy you mentioned initially around, so I'm with this person, so they are what I'm seeking. I don't see them anymore. It's even a very, the writer Stendhal, that wrote about, he calls this the crystallization. It's like, instead of seeing something outdoors, I don't know the word in English, like when you have a tree, you have branches. Is that the word? Yes, I don't know. And so instead of seeing them like, okay, it's winter, there is nothing on it, it's just there on the tree. They see it as a beautiful thing, maybe with pearls on it or with diamonds on it. And in time, they see the real person, but they fell in love with something that's not really existing. Like a projection of and all those things we, even I've been writing, or we can read around the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, also creates in ourselves this type of fantasy around the ideal partner that's going to be this. And they have to be that. And so sometimes we tend to not really see who they are because we say, oh, this is a sacred masculine, for example.
We can label things a certain way and really hold on to it. And I think it's human and natural to have fantasies, right? Or to have an ideal partner in mind. And it's not something you have to abandon, but it's really, really becoming aware of, this is the actual person and this is the fantasy. And actually, when we get to know our fantasy or what we think is our ideal partner, it's easier to recognize when you start to project. So it doesn't mean you have to push away your fantasies. Actually, becoming aware of them, I feel, is the best way to go about it.
Exactly.
And also I also want to ask you some last few questions, and I also ask you to prepare a few for me as well.
I did.
So are you ready for it?
So I ask you first?
Yes,
okay,
let's do that.
So okay, so first one, I don't know why your energy to me is very connected to traveling and geography. I don't know why, maybe, I don't know. So my first question is, what's your favorite city in the world?
Well, can you repeat it?
What is your favorite city?
Oh, favorite city
in the world, and
in
why?
The world. Favorite city. That's a difficult one. Because I like to travel, I really find it difficult to pick a place, like one place. And then I would be probably just going for the energy of the city, I think, because it was really close to mine. And there was Brisbane in Australia. And I don't know, I just went there, and then I know that I left the plane and I just walked there. I was still at the airport. I was like, yeah, something here just feels so grounding and so nice. And it also reminds me kind of the city where I live as well, which is also close to the beach. And it has a very similar energy to Den Haag, the city where I live in the Netherlands. And yeah, I think Brisbane is kind of the Hague of Australia in a way. So yeah, it also reminded me of home, but very different, of course. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I was feeling this energy of I don't know, seeing you in different type of environment or different landscapes or different colors of places, also different vibes. You know, I believe each city has an energy that's very special and it's very specific. Okay. So the second question is, so which astrological sign do you identify the most with? Like, even if it's not your sun sign or your rising, whatever, which one do you identify the most with and why?
Yeah, I do identify most actually just with my own zodiac sign. It's Aquarius. And because for me, I feel like really I'm someone that likes to be of service. And I really that always to kind of really caring about the planet and humanity, and also being like people thinking always that I'm really social and really extroverted, but actually I'm like an introvert who really always thinks differently. So I do identify a lot with my own zodiac sign. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Like, so it's your sun sign,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
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 Okay. And my third question is, what is the thing, like it can be anything, what is the thing you're the most proud of?
Thing I'm most proud of. I feel like the thing I'm most proud of is healing from heart disease and from my heart attack. I feel like that is, yeah, because I think it's also the biggest challenge I had in life, and to go through that and move through that is also then for me did my biggest accomplishment, and something I'm proud of, that okay, I went through it, but I got out of it on the other side. And
Beautiful. Okay, amazing.
Yeah, I really liked your question. So so just before we're about to close off, I of course also have a few more questions for you. And the first one is, what is your greatest fear?
I think it is the death of the people I really love and care for. Because for me, there is like, if someone dies, like, of course, I'm sure, you know, you can talk to them through the air and whatever. But to me, it's like you cannot move forward with a connection at all. And there is no way back to what happened. I think this fear is because in my childhood, like many people that were key figures of my childhood passed away kind of soon. Not when I was a child, but more like a teenager or very young adult. And with all of them, we didn't really have the conversation we should have had. So it sort of left me with, you're young and you think one day you're going to be able to say something, and then the person leaves and you're like, okay, so this is a share, or this is a conversation we'll never have. So I think I fear the death of others.
Yeah, and then this question actually kind of moves on to that. Do you believe in life after death? And so what do you believe that might happen when we die?
Interesting. So I do believe really, so in past lives, I believe that we reincarnate. And it's interesting because I've really started to study evolutionary astrology and how we can see this in the chart. Initially, I wasn't really drawn to that or believing in it. But then you can, I have like knowledge and books and things around people that have tried to find evidence of life before birth and life after death, you know, that we reincarnate. And there are like really children being able to say, okay, so I know this place, and you know, there are evidence of it. I think. So I think that after death, we maybe in the interlife, like between two lives, and then we tend to go into another body, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And if you could now kind of write a message to like your younger self, so your child self around like 7 or 8 years old, like a message in a bottle, you could kind of see it. So a short message, and then they're tiny walking on the beach, and then they find that bottle with a message in it. If you could put it in there right now, what would it be?
So I instantly felt that the message would be, I have your back. So it would be like a message of you're protected and you are like you're safe and protected by me as an older figure. Yeah. Because myself as a child, I had dreams and I had visions and I wanted to do a lot of things and all that, but I wasn't really feeling protected by the environment and the surroundings, and I think it blocked me a little in my, you know, maybe a little, I don't know, in my development. So I needed a sort of strength that I couldn't really find on my own, and so this is a way of telling her, you're protected, I have your back.
Yeah. And it's also in a way, what I always say, like, I have your back is also in a way of I support you.
Yeah.
That's the feeling. Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. So Sophie, I really want to thank you so much for being here and being open. I really enjoyed the conversation. So yeah.
Thank you, me too.
Yeah.
Very interesting, very enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah. And if anyone is interested in Sophie's new book, She's the Moon, I'll also put a link down below so it will be easier for you to find it. Yeah, I really enjoyed reading it. Especially, I think it's a good book to read before going to bed. At least for me, just like in the evening. I think it's a nice book before you go off to sleep and dream. So I really enjoyed it.
I understand why. Thank you.
So I also want to thank everyone for listening today, and I want to wish you a beautiful day.
Thank you.